I was born deaf, completely deaf, in a world where everyone spoke, shouted, laughed, and cried with sounds I could never hear. My name is Gabriel Almeida Tavares, and for 28 years of my life, silence was all I knew. But it wasn't an empty silence. It was a heavy silence, burdened by isolation, by pitying looks, and by a loneliness that no one who can hear can truly comprehend. My father, Henrique Tavares, owned an empire. He had ranches, factories, hotels, and an estimated fortune of over 800 million Brazilian reais, and I was his only son, the heir, the disappointment. The day I discovered that a maid in our house, a simple woman named Celia, held a secret that would change not only my life, but the lives of everyone around me, I understood that sometimes the most important sound doesn't come from the ears, but from the heart. If you've ever felt like the world looks at you as if you're less, as if your existence is a burden, this story will show you that the greatest revolution one can make in another person's life doesn't need words, it needs true love. Before I continue this story, I wanted to ask you for something simple. If you enjoy listening to real stories that touch your heart and make us reflect on life, subscribe to the channel. Every week we bring stories like this about people who have gone through situations that you might be experiencing right now. Your subscription helps me continue bringing these stories, and I promise each one of them will be worth your time. I grew up on the Santa Helena Ranch, a 500-acre property in the interior of São Paulo. The main house had 18 bedrooms, a library that looked more like a museum, an infinity pool, and a garden so vast I used to get lost in it as a child. But no matter how much luxury there was, that place was never a real home. It was cold. The walls were made of Italian marble, the chandeliers were Austrian crystal, and the floor creaked in a way I only perceived through vibrations in my bare feet. I didn't hear the noise, but I felt it. Everything I knew of the world came through touch, sight, and smell. The smell of fresh coffee my mother Beatrice drank every morning on the veranda, her expensive perfume mixed with the scent of white roses she insisted on having fresh in the living room vases. The cold touch of the marble when I woke up in the middle of the night and tiptoed to the kitchen. My mother was a beautiful woman. She had those light eyes that sparkled when she smiled at guests, but that became empty when she looked at me. Beatrice never truly hugged me. She touched me like one touches a fragile object that might break at any moment, with excessive care and emotional distance. I realized this very early on, even without hearing the words she spoke. Her body language screamed it. She'd avert her gaze when I tried to communicate with signs. She'd sigh deeply every time I entered the room. And when there were visitors, she'd hide me, literally. "Gabriel, go to your room, honey. Mommy has an important meeting." I read her lips. I learned to lip read at 5 years old because no one in my house wanted to learn Libras, the Brazilian sign language. No one except Celia. Celia was 52 when I met her. She had been hired to work in the ranch's kitchen, but she soon became much more than that. She was short, had her grey hair pulled back in a tight bun, hands calloused from years of work, and a smile that lit up any room. Celia had no formal education. She could barely write her own name, but she had something that no wealthy person in that house possessed. She had empathy. The first day she saw me, I was 6 years old. I was sitting alone in the garden, drawing on the ground with a stick. She approached slowly, crouched in front of me, and did something no one had ever done. She smiled at me, not with pity, but with genuine joy. And then she started drawing with me. We stayed there, in silence, two strangers creating imaginary worlds in the dirt. In the following days, Celia started learning Libras. She bought an old book at a used bookstore in town, one of those with yellowed pages and a musty smell, And every night, after finishing her work, she'd sit in the kitchen and study. I didn't know it at the time, but years later she told me. She said she couldn't bear to live in the same house as a boy that no one could truly hear. And then, 3 months later, on a Saturday afternoon, while I was in the library flipping through a book of animal photographs, she entered and made the first sign to me. "Hi, Gabriel. My name is Celia." My eyes filled with tears. I was 6 years old, and for the first time in my life, someone had spoken to me in my language. I couldn't respond. I could only run to her and hug her with all the strength a small, invisible boy could muster. My father, Henrique, was the complete opposite of Celia. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, his grey hair always slicked back, and a posture that made it clear he was in charge of everything and everyone. He never hit me, never yelled at me, at least not that I heard. But he ignored me in such a profound way that it hurt more than any slap. He looked right through me as if I were a ghost. When he came home after days of business trips, he'd greet my mother with a kiss on the cheek, talk to the staff, check on the horses, review the ranch reports, and only then, if there was time left, he'd nod his head in my direction. A curt nod, emotionless, absent. Once, when I was 10, I wrote him a letter. It took me hours to write it in my childish, crooked handwriting. The letter said, "Dad, I love you. I wish we could spend more time together. I want to show you the drawings I make. I want you to know that I exist." I left the letter on his office desk. 3 days later, the letter was still there, in the same spot, untouched, covered in dust. He never read it. I never tried again. Celia saw that letter. She didn't say anything at the time, but that night she came into my room, sat on the edge of my bed and started signing. "Your father doesn't know how to love, Gabriel. But that doesn't mean you don't deserve love. I love you, and I'll always be here." I was 10 years old, and I cried in the arms of a maid as if she were my real mother, because in that moment she was. The years passed, and the ranch routine continued. I grew up isolated but not alone, because Celia was always there. She taught me to cook, took me fishing in the property's lake on Sundays, told me stories of her childhood, of when she lived in a mud-brick house in the interior of Bahia and shared a mattress with 5 siblings. She made me laugh. More importantly, she made me feel like I mattered. Meanwhile, my father continued building his empire. He opened a chain of luxury hotels in the Northeast. He bought a stake in a mining company. He invested in technology. He was always too busy to look at the deaf son he considered a genetic mistake. My mother, Beatrice, on the other hand, lived immersed in a world of appearances. She organized charity dinners where she raised money for good causes, but she treated her household staff as if they were invisible. She wore expensive dresses, inherited jewelry, and smiled for the cameras while handing out food baskets to the poor. But at home, she barely looked at me. Once, when I was 14, she took me to a doctor in Boston, a specialist in cochlear implants. She wanted to fix me. The doctor explained the risks, the chances of success, the rehabilitation process. My mother listened intently and then looked at me and said, "You have to try, Gabriel. You have to be normal." I read her lips and felt a pain in my chest that no implant could cure. I didn't want to be fixed. I wanted to be accepted. I refused the procedure. She never forgave me for it. When I turned 18, my father called me into his office. It was one of the few times he actually spoke to me. He had a serious, almost annoyed expression and began to speak slowly so I could read his lips. "Gabriel, you are my only son. One day, all of this will be yours. But I need to know if you're ready. You'll need to manage companies, make decisions, lead people, and you can't hear. How are you going to do that?" I stayed silent, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I knew anything I said wouldn't be enough for him. So I just walked out of the room. He didn't call me back. Celia was in the kitchen when I arrived. She saw I was shaken and signed, asking what had happened. I told her everything. She shook her head, took a deep breath, and said, "One day, Gabriel, you'll prove to him that being deaf isn't being incapable. But until then, you need to believe in yourself. Because I believe in you." Those words kept me going that day, and on so many other difficult days that followed. I graduated with a degree in business administration from Boston University. It wasn't easy. I needed an ASL interpreter in every class, faced prejudice from professors who doubted my abilities, and endured bullying from classmates who made jokes about me behind my back, literally, because they knew I couldn't hear. But I graduated with honors. On graduation day, I looked for my father in the audience. He was there, in a dark suit, sitting in the back row, looking at his phone. He didn't see me walk across the stage. He didn't see me receive my diploma. He didn't see the tears streaming down my face when the dean shook my hand. But Celia did. She was in the front row in a simple floral dress she had sewn herself, and she was crying with pride as if I were her own son. After graduation, my father put me to work in one of the family businesses. I started as an administrative assistant, which was humiliating considering I was the heir to the empire. But I didn't complain. I wanted to prove my worth. For 2 years, I worked harder than any other employee. I arrived before everyone else and left after everyone else. I read every report, attended every meeting with an interpreter, and presented innovative ideas that increased the department's efficiency by 30%. But my father never acknowledged it. He delegated the most important tasks to other executives and left me with bureaucratic and irrelevant work. Meanwhile, Celia continued working on the ranch. She was almost 60, but still woke up at 5 in the morning to make coffee for the house. She cleaned, cooked, tended the garden, and in her spare time, she signed with me. She was the only person in that house who saw me as a human being. But she was tired. I could tell. Her hands trembled when she held the pots. Her knees popped when she climbed the stairs. She had constant back pain, but never complained. When I asked if she was okay, she always smiled and said, "I'm great, my son. As long as I can be near you, I'll be fine." One day, on a Thursday afternoon, I got home from work early and found Celia sitting in the kitchen, her head in her hands, crying. I had never seen her cry before. My heart leapt. I rushed over to her, touched her shoulder, and signed, asking what had happened. She wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and began to tell me something that would change everything. If this story is touching you, imagine what comes next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories like this. Here we tell real stories of people who faced the impossible, and I'm sure many of them will make you feel less alone on this journey. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been in a situation where you felt the ground disappear beneath your feet? Have you ever had a moment where the person you trusted most disappointed you in a way you never imagined? Write, "I've been there," below, if this story touched you in any way. Your comment might be exactly the message someone else needed to read today, to know they're not alone. Celia signed slowly, her hands trembling. "Gabriel, I need to tell you something. I've kept this for many years, and I can't bear it anymore." I sat in the chair next to her, my heart pounding so hard I could feel the pulsations in my neck. "Your father, he doesn't ignore you because you're deaf. He ignores you because he's ashamed." I frowned, confused. Celia continued, When you were born, the doctors told your parents you were deaf because of a complication during delivery. Your mother had a severe infection, and you were without oxygen for a few minutes. That's what caused the deafness. But your father, he never accepted it. He blamed your mother. He said she hadn't taken care of her pregnancy properly, that she had drunk wine at a dinner party, that she had stressed herself out too much. He put the blame on her. I felt my stomach churn. And your mother, she never forgave him for that. But she also never forgave you. Because every time she looks at you, she sees her own failing. She sees his accusation. So she pushes you away. She treats you as if you were living proof that she wasn't a good mother. Tears welled up in Celia's eyes again. I overheard that conversation between them 20 years ago, Gabriel, shortly after you were born. I was cleaning the hallway and heard them arguing in the bedroom. Your father was yelling, your mother was crying, and I stood there, frozen, not knowing what to do. From that day on, I promised myself I would love you as much as they couldn't. I was speechless. Her words echoed in my head, even without sound. My whole life made sense now. The distance, the coldness, the empty stares. It all had an explanation. But knowing the truth didn't ease the pain. Quite the opposite. It hurt more, because it meant my parents were aware of what they were doing. They weren't ignoring me by accident. They were ignoring me by choice. I got up from the chair, walked to the window, and looked at the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. The ranch was silent, as it always had been for me. But now the silence weighed differently. It was a silence of rejection, of hurt, of a pain I had carried alone for 28 years. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything Celia had told me. I thought about all the times I tried to get closer to my father, and he pushed me away. All the times I tried to hug my mother, and she stiffened. I thought about the letter I wrote at 10 years old that he never read. I thought about all the achievements I had that no one celebrated. I thought about how I felt invisible in my own home. And for the first time in my life, I felt anger, not sadness. Anger. Anger at being treated like a mistake. Anger at being rejected by the only two people who should have loved me unconditionally. Anger at spending my entire life trying to be enough for people who never wanted to accept me. The next morning, I woke up, determined. I was going to confront my father. I went down to his office, knocked hard on the door, and walked in without waiting for a response. He was sitting behind his giant mahogany desk, looking at papers and contracts. He looked up, surprised by my intrusion. I made quick signs, angrily, knowing he didn't understand a word. Then I grabbed a notepad and a pen and started writing. Why did you never love me? Why did you always treat me like I was a burden? I'm your son. I deserve respect. I deserve love. I threw the paper on his desk. He read it. His expression didn't change. He was silent for a few seconds that felt like hours, and then he picked up the pen and wrote back. I gave you everything. A home, education, opportunities. What more do you want? I read that and felt a mix of despair and indignation. I grabbed the pen back and wrote with a hand trembling with rage. I wanted a father, not a provider. A father. He read it, placed the pen on the desk, took a deep breath, and wrote another sentence. I don't know how to be a father to someone like you. Those words destroyed me. Someone like you. As if I were an alien, as if being deaf made me less human. I grabbed the paper, crumpled it tightly, and threw it on the floor. I stormed out of the office, slamming the door so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. I didn't cry. Not then, I was too furious to cry. Celia found me in the garden, sitting under a tree, my head between my knees. She approached slowly, sat beside me, and placed her hand on my shoulder. I looked up and signed. I hate him, Celia. I hate both of them. They'll never change. I'll never be enough. She shook her head and signed back. You are enough, Gabriel. You always were. The problem isn't you. It's them. They're trapped in their own pain and can't see the incredible sun they have right in front of them. I wanted to believe her, but it was hard, because when you spend your whole life being rejected, there comes a point where you start to believe there's truly something wrong with you. 2 weeks after that confrontation, my father had a heart attack. It was in the middle of the night. My mother woke up to him struggling in bed, his face pale and sweaty, his hands clutching his chest. She screamed for help, but I obviously didn't hear. Celia woke me by banging desperately on my bedroom door. When I opened it, her eyes were wide, and she was signing frantically. "Your father, hospital, quick!" I threw on the first clothes I found and ran to his room. The paramedics were already there, putting him on a gurney. My mother was panicking, crying, yelling things I couldn't understand. They took my father to the hospital in Ribeirão Preto. I drove behind the ambulance, my hands sweating on the wheel, my heart pounding. I didn't know what I felt. Fear, guilt, anger, maybe all of it. We arrived at the hospital and the doctors took him straight to the ICU. My mother and I waited in the waiting room. She sat in a chair, her face buried in her hands, sobbing. I stood by the window trying to process everything. Hours passed. The doctor finally came out and started talking to my mother. I read his lips. He's stable. It was a severe heart attack, but we managed to stabilize him. He'll need surgery and will have to completely change his lifestyle. Less stress, controlled diet, light exercises. My mother thanked him, still crying. The doctor looked at me, hesitated, and said, "You can see him, but only one at a time, and for a short while." My mother went first. When she came out, 20 minutes later, she was different. Her face was more serene, but her eyes were still red. She looked at me, and for the first time in years, she truly looked at me. Not through me. At me. She made a gesture indicating it was my turn. I took a deep breath and entered the ICU room. My father was lying in bed, hooked up to various machines. His skin was grey, his lips pale. He looked smaller, more fragile. Human. I approached slowly and sat in the chair next to his bed. He opened his eyes and saw me. For a few seconds, neither of us did anything. Then with difficulty he raised his right hand and pointed to a notepad and a pen on the table beside him. I picked them up and handed them to him. He wrote, his hand trembling. "Sorry." That word hit me like lightning. Sorry, that was it. No explanations, no justifications, just sorry. I picked up the pen and wrote back. "Why?" He read it, closed his eyes and wrote another sentence, very slowly. "Because I'm a coward, and you are stronger than I will ever be." I read that and felt something break inside me. It wasn't anger, it was pure sadness, because he was right. He was a coward. And it took a heart attack for him to admit it. I didn't write anything else, I just held his hand. And for the first time in my life, I felt him squeeze my hand back. My father survived the surgery. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital and another 2 months recovering at home. During that time, something changed. He started looking at me, not with shame or indifference, but with something close to respect. He hadn't learned sign language yet, but he made the effort to write notes for me. "Good morning. How are you? Thanks for keeping things together while I'm away." Simple phrases, but they meant the world to me. My mother changed too, though more slowly. She started greeting me in the morning. asking if I wanted anything specific for dinner, including me in household conversations, even if through written messages. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't the unconditional love I'd always craved, but it was a start. Celia watched it all from a distance, a subtle smile on her face. She knew this transformation was fragile, but she was happy for me. One day, while we were in the kitchen preparing lunch together, she signed. You see, sometimes people need to lose almost everything to learn to appreciate what they have. I smiled and signed back. You taught me that, Celia. You taught me that love doesn't need sound, it just needs presence. She wiped away a tear and hugged me tight. But life has a cruel way of reminding us that nothing lasts forever. 3 months after my father's recovery, Celia started feeling unwell. She had stomach pains she brushed off, saying it was just gastritis. But the pain worsened. She began losing weight rapidly. Her skin turned sallow. I insisted she see a doctor. She resisted, but finally agreed. The tests revealed the worst possible news. Pancreatic cancer, advanced stage. The doctor said she had 6 months at most. When Celia told me, I broke down. She was sitting on the bed in her room, in the annex of the house where the staff lived, and I was on my knees on the floor, holding her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. She stroked my hair and signed. Don't cry, my boy. I lived a good life. And the best years of my life were these. Taking care of you. I signed back, my hands trembling. You can't leave me, Celia. You're the only one who ever truly loved me. I don't know how to live without you. She smiled, her eyes brimming with tears. You will. Because I taught you to be strong. And the love I have for you will never die. It will be here. She touched my chest. Forever. The following months were the hardest of my life. Celia grew weaker and weaker. She couldn't work anymore, could barely get out of bed. I began to care for her. I brought her food, medicine, sat by her side, reading books aloud, even though I knew she could hear and I couldn't. She said she liked watching my lips move, that it calmed her. My mother, surprisingly, started helping too. She visited Celia every day, brought flowers, talked with her. My father, still recovering, paid for the best doctors, the best palliative care, ensured Celia was not in pain. On Celia's last day, the whole family gathered in her room. My mother, my father, me, and even some of the other household staff who loved her. She lay there, breathing with difficulty but still conscious. She asked to speak with me alone. Everyone left. I sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. She signed very slowly, with the little strength she had left. Gabriel, promise me something. I nodded, my eyes welling up. Promise me you'll keep being kind, that you'll keep believing in love, that you won't let the pain turn you into someone bitter. Because the world already has enough bitter people. The world needs people like you, I promised. She smiled, closed her eyes, and 5 minutes later, she was gone. Silently. As everything always was for me, Celia's burial was in a small-town cemetery. There were few people, but everyone there truly loved her. My father insisted on paying for everything, the casket, the flowers, the ceremony. During the funeral, my mother approached me and handed me an envelope. Celia asked me to give you this, she said, and I read her lips. I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter in Celia's shaky script. The letter read, Gabriel, my heart's son. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But I want you to know I have no regrets. Taking care of you was the greatest honor of my life. You taught me that love needs no words, only actions. You taught me that the disability isn't in not hearing, but in not knowing how to truly listen. Keep being this light. The world needs you. With all my love, Celia. I folded the letter, put it in my pocket, and let the tears fall freely. My father approached, put his hand on my shoulder, and for the first time in my life, he hugged me. A real hug. Tight, warm, full of regret and belated love. My mother joined us, and we stood there, the three of us, embracing in silence in the middle of the cemetery. It wasn't the ending I wanted, but it was the ending I needed. Because sometimes life has to break us completely for us to learn to rebuild ourselves in a better way. Today, 5 years after Celia's death, I manage the family businesses. My father retired and handed over the reins to me. He finally learned sign language, not perfectly, but enough for us to communicate. My mother too. Our relationship isn't perfect, but it's real, it's honest, and it's full of a love that should have been there from the start, but arrived albeit late. I created a foundation in Celia's name that offers free sign language education for families of deaf children. Because I don't want any child to go through what I went through. I want every deaf child to have at least one Celia in their life. Someone who sees them, who truly hears them, who loves them unconditionally. If this story touched your heart in any way, I beg you, subscribe to the channel. Here we don't just tell stories, we create a space where real people share real pain and find comfort knowing they are not alone. Every subscription helps me continue this work, and I promise that every week you'll find a story here that will make you reflect, cry, smile, and above all, feel understood. And before you go, do me a favor, write in the comments one word, just one that summarizes what you felt listening to this story. It can be hope, it can be strength, it can be pain. It doesn't matter what it is, because every comment down below turns into a chain of support for someone who might be going through the worst phase of their life and needs to know that people care. Write, "This story touched me," if you felt something. Thank you so much for staying with me this far. It means more than you can imagine. Hit that like button if this story moved you, and I'll see you in the next one. I'll be waiting for you right here.